Welcome to our first session of Held, a series specifically for individuals that are looking for a little bit of fluid movement, but with lots of deep, grounded rest, creating, with the use of our props, a sensation of being held and supported and kind of cocooned, however you want to say it, whatever it feels like in your body. That's what we're doing here. So at the beginning of each class, we will be going through just a little bit of fluid movement. And I see this as kind of just getting the wiggles out. And then we'll move into a time of more restorative / yin postures with our props. And so if you don't already, grab some blocks if you have them, and a couple blankets, and maybe even a bolster. I will definitely be using the bolster, so if you have one, you might like to have it. If you don't have a bolster, then you could always use like a couch cushion, or even stack some thick pillows on top of one another, or even just stacking blankets, more dense blankets, not really so much fluffy. So lots of different ways we can come into these shapes, and you don't have to have fancy yoga props. Oftentimes the things that you have around your house are good. So with that being said, I welcome you to find your place on your mat. I have a blanket here that I'll be using just for some knee support, and so it's optional if you'd like to lay a blanket out. And then we'll just start in child's pose. So if you'd like to join me there, you can. And the way that I like to come into child's pose is I like to have my knees separated, maybe a little bit hip distance apart. You could take them wider, you could take them as wide as your mat, you could take them narrower. And then I just have my big toes touching back behind me, kind of creating a V pattern. And then we can sink the hips back toward the heels. They don't have to touch the heels, but maybe just in that direction as we slowly lower our head and torso to the ground. Everything in this class is optional. And it's optional because I cannot feel your experience. I cannot feel your body. Only you can do that. So I provide options so that you can choose for yourself what feels right, what feels supportive, compared to what might not. And so as we come into this child's pose, if you want to lower your forehead to the floor, you can. If it doesn't feel right to do that, for whatever reason, some other options is to stack your fists, maybe rest your chin on your fists so that you could keep your gaze up. Or you might even just stack your fists and rest your forehead on your fist. You could always choose to turn your head to the side. And you could always choose to forego this shape completely. There are no right or wrongs, shoulds or should nots in this class. There is only you, your current experience, your body, your sensations, and your choices. Even if you choose something different than what I'm doing, your choice is always celebrated. So when you find where you want to be, I welcome you to take a good 7 or so breaths here, just arriving on your mat. You might notice the feeling of the mat or the blanket beneath your body. Noticing that the floor is holding you up. Thanks to gravity, our body will sink down if we allow it to. So perhaps you bring some awareness to this gravitational pull. Observing the fact that you're not going to float away. You're right here, grounded, connected, stable, supported. Just as you kneel down towards the floor rises up to meet you. And you can choose to be here as long as you like. You could spend the entire practice here if you decide to. And that would be welcome. Or if you're ready for some movement, at any point you might begin to lift your head up, start to lift your chest, maybe stretching your arms out. An option to sway from side to side, just gently easing into the side body. You set the pace. You set the rhythm. This is just organic, intuitive movement. And then if at any point you'd like to rock forward, that's also an option. You can adjust your knees here. You can adjust your hands to anything that feels stable. There's no right or wrong. And continuing to move organically. Now you might like to sway from side to side, continuing to peel the ribs open, one side and then the other. You might choose to rock forward and then back. Anything goes here. The point is that there is no wrong choice. This is not about alignment. This is not about looking a certain way. This is strictly and completely just feeling your way into your body. If at any point you'd like to allow your spine to drape down towards the earth, you can. Maybe you even open up your heart and shine it forward. When it feels right, you might even peel your spine up, curling it in the opposite direction toward the ceiling. This time maybe you shine the back of your heart up towards the sky. Continuing in whatever way feels right to you for the next 4 rounds of breath. You might even create a wave-like motion with your spine, sending it back, and then curling it forward, just like a wave coming in and out. These are just suggestions for you to consider, to kind of prime your brain in case you're like, I don't really know what to do here. It's okay. These are just options. As we take our last breath, starting to find that last little bit of movement. And then I'll meet you in tabletop, right at center whenever you get here. If you're not done moving intuitively, that's okay. Take your time. There's no rush. And if you have blocks, you might pull them in close to you. And perhaps even bringing them right underneath your shoulders and resting your hands on them. When you're ready, you could step your right foot forward and settle in to a low lunge. Now you can take a moment to adjust. So if you feel like, well, my hands are really far back, you can move your blocks. If it feels like, oh man, my front leg feels really jammed up, another option is to take your right foot, your front foot, and just heel toe it over to the edge of your mat. It's a wider stance. It might feel a bit more spacious. That's another option. So as you settle in here, you might take just a moment to notice whatever sensation is present. Can you find it in your body? Option to stay here in this low lunge. Option to move a little bit dynamically if that's calling to you. So what that could look like, I like to move my blocks back a little bit so that I'm not reaching so far ahead. But you could begin to send the hips back as you lengthen through your front leg, maybe even your toes peel up off of the floor. And then maybe you pause here in this half splits, or perhaps you continue to rock in and out. You choose. You also might notice if your blocks need to change position or change levels. Like I feel like, whoa, I feel a little bit jammed up in my arms, so I'm gonna adjust. And then I'm gonna take my blocks higher because that's what my body's asking for. But that doesn't mean that's what you have to do. I'm just showing you different options. We'll take another 2 or 3 rounds of breath here. Last round of breath in and out. And then if you feel complete, I'll meet you back in a low lunge. We can move the blocks out of the way. All right. We're going to do a nice little side stretch here. So if you want to join, you can take your right foot, your front foot, and just start heel toeing it kind of back into the side. I'm just going to hang out there for a second. My left hand is just going to extend forward. I'm going to plant it on the floor. And then I'm going to allow my left hip to just sink to the floor. Now, I went ahead and moved my right foot back because it was just way too high up for me. And so we end up with our left hip on the floor. Our left arm is kind of posting for us. And our right knee, right foot, right leg is just kind of here, providing like a kickstand, if you will. So the whole experience here is not so much about getting it right. It's not about, again, it's not about alignment even. My encouragement to you is to feel your way into it. If you want your foot to be farther forward or further back, you can adjust as needed. So as we're here with this really nice big opening on the left side of our body, your right hand can simply just rest. Just rest on your leg, maybe your hip, whatever feels good. And we'll just breathe here for a moment. If this shape is overwhelming in sensation, another option is to bring your left elbow down to the earth and come into it. Same way, just the elbows down. And that will reduce the stretch that you feel in your side body. Another 3 breaths in and out. And then when you feel satisfied, you could bring your hands back down to the floor and just come back to tabletop, back to center. Option to sink back into a child's pose for just 3 breaths. Just taking a little break, especially because that last one, the side stretch, can require a little bit more in the muscle department to hold us up. And we'll prepare to take that on the other side, and then we'll start to sink down into some heavy shapes. So if you're ready to continue moving, you could begin to inhale and breathe your way forward. If you liked the blocks for your low lunge, you might grab them again. And now you know what feels right to your body. So when you're ready, you can step your left foot forward and adjust as needed. Taking this opportunity to feel to the opposite side of your body. And then if and when you're ready, you might decide to send your hips back, maybe lengthening through the front leg, maybe allowing the toes to come up. And you could decide to just stay here, or you could decide to rock in and out of it. And just because you did one thing on the previous side does not mean that you have to do it on this side. You can change your mind. So you choose. We'll be here for another 4 rounds of breath. Last breath here, if you're ready to find completion. And then if you do feel satisfied, you can meet me back in low lunge. Move our blocks out of the way. And we'll begin to heel toe the left foot back toward the left as we create our post with our right arm and allow the right hip to come down towards the mat, making any adjustments needed. So like for example, right now, my left hip feels really jammed up. And so I'm actually just gonna allow my left leg to kind of open up to allow my hip to drop down. And then I'm gonna come back into it. So you can make adjustments as needed. There's no rules here. And then another option is to drop down onto your right elbow if you prefer that. So wherever you wanna be, you can find your way there. And we'll hang out here for another 5 breaths. Perhaps even sending your breath into your right ribs, allowing your side body to open up even more, if that feels welcome. So we take our last breath here. And then in your own timing, you could bring both hands to the floor and start to peel yourself back. And here, if you have a bolster, we'll set up for a nice supported child's pose. So you could bring your bolster right in front of you. If you don't have a bolster, you might just stack some blankets on top of one and fold them up and stack them so that it resembles something like a bolster. I like to draw my bolster in kind of close to me so it's at the inside of my legs. And then option 1 is to just leave the bolster flat on the floor as you lower yourself down and sink into a nice heavy child's pose. A second option is to bring your bolster to you by using your blocks. You could just stick a block underneath the edge of your bolster, the furthest away from you. And then again, come into it this way. And it really doesn't matter which one you choose. Your choice doesn't say anything about your body, doesn't say anything about your character. It's simply your choice, your preference. And then as you come into this supported child's pose shape, you might return back to that awareness of the gravitational pull. Our fluid movement is complete, and we'll be moving into sinking and melting and grounding. We'll be here in this supported child's pose for another 10 to 12 breaths. So that means 10 to 12 inhales and 10 to 12 exhales. And if you turn your head to one side, at any point that your body calls to you to turn it to the other side, you can just answer that call. No rhyme or reason. Just following the promptings of your body. And if it feels right, you might even work with an affirmation. As our bodies become still, sometimes our minds need an anchor. And so I offer you the community affirmation. I give myself permission to let go and be held. I give myself permission to let go. I give myself permission to be held. If you let go of your muscles for the remainder of this class, what will happen? Will the floor continue to hold you? Will gravity continue to ground you? Starting to find completion here. Taking our last few rounds of breath. And now you can decide if you're ready to move out of this shape, because you can stay here as long as you want. And if you are ready, you might begin to slowly lift yourself up. You might even move as if you were a sloth. Really slow, taking your time. And then for our next shape, you might move your bolster just forward a little bit if you need some room. And we'll grab a second blanket. Just have that here. And we'll adjust our legs so that we can stretch them out in front of us. Now, this forward fold we're about to have the opportunity to come into, there's a couple different ways you can come into it. There's a couple different ways you can feel supported here. So I'm going to show you two different ways. Now, I'm going to move my bolsters so that you can see what I'm doing. I invite you to use a blanket wedge, which is not something that we typically do here, or have done in the past at least in these Soma yoga classes, but I've been using it recently and I find that it's just very spacious, and so I give you the option today. You might not like it, or your body might really like it. So here I just have a folded up blanket. I'm going to fold it in half again, and I'm just going to place it right at my hip crease so that when I lean over it, it creates this little wedge that kind of allows me to settle into it and onto it without folding so far into my body. So here's that. And then you might want to have your blocks and other props close by. And then you might even explore the width of your wedge. So having it halfway might not be enough. You might need to fold it into thirds, or it might be too much and you might need to take away some of that folding. Or you might not like it at all, in which case you can just skip it. And so having my blocks in front of me, having them close by, here's option one. My feet are hip distance apart, however, you can choose the width of your preference. And with my blanket wedge here, I like to lengthen through my spine so that I can really tuck the wedge in. And I'm gonna breathe in. And as I exhale, I'm gonna lean over that wedge. And using my blocks, I'm going to find a spot for my forehead to rest. Now, I actually feel that this blanket wedge is not enough, and so I'm going to fold it into thirds now. I want a little bit more support. And then I'm also going to use my elbows to just kind of provide some stabilization there, and my hands are just going to rest on the tops of my legs. So here's option 1. Here's option 2. You can take another blanket, and this one is like my favorite. It's so luxurious. I'm going to just take this other rolled up blanket and slide it underneath my knees. And I'm just gonna rest my knees, the backs of my knees on this blanket. I have my blanket wedge, I have my blocks. Now I'm going to fold into it. Now, depending on the props that you have available to you, you might have to use a bolster instead. You might have to use a towel. You might just have to get creative with it. So the point that I'm making is that sometimes what we have available to us is not the exact same as what's in the class, what the teacher is using. And so you can just get creative and use what you have on hand. You also might not need everything that I'm using. Maybe your body doesn't want it. Or you might use more. So wherever you end up, however you end up, I welcome you to settle in. We'll be here for a little bit longer. We'll be here about 20 to 22 breaths. Returning to the awareness of gravity. As you become aware of this, you might notice any area in your body where your muscles are clenching or holding on, still doing work. And if it feels safe, if it feels welcome, you might allow those muscles just slowly let go. Maybe it's your feet. Maybe it's your hips. Maybe it's your shoulders or your jaw, your head or your neck, your hands. Can you let your muscles surrender to gravity? Because here's the thing about holding on, whether it's your muscles or something else in life. When we are holding, when we are grasping, it prevents us from letting go and receiving. It prevents us from being held. And there are moments for both. Sometimes we are doing the holding, and sometimes we are being held. And in this moment, I offer you this opportunity to be held. Let go of what you're holding so that you can be held. Surrender to gravity. Let the floor rise up to meet you. And start to find the last few rounds of breath here. Moving slowly, like honey. You could begin to make your way out of this shape when you're ready. Resting at the top. And feeling the effects in your body. Option 2, move through your neck, if that's something that your neck is asking for. And then taking the blocks and setting them to the side, or rather in front of you. We can take the rolled up blanket that's underneath the knees and set that to the side. We can cross our legs in front of us. Doesn't matter how you cross them, whatever works. And here with our blocks in front of us, I'm going to have one at the highest level and one at the medium level. And the one that's at medium, if you want your bolster to be a little bit higher up, a little bit more supported, you can have it at the medium level here, or if you want a little bit more give, you can set this second block at the lowest level. I'm going to choose to have a bit more give, so that's what I'm going to go for. And then I'm going to place my bolster on top. So I'm going to set the bolster right in front on the floor, and I'm going to let it tip back and land. Here, I like to use the blanket wedge again. However, you might not like to. So when we get into this forward fold, you can kind of choose how your body, or notice how your body is responding and choose appropriately. So I'm scooched up right in front of my bolster, have my blanket wedge. And with your inhale, you might allow your spine to float up and lengthen. And then as you exhale, you can take your hands to the bolster or the floor and lean forward. And here you can turn your head to one side as we come into this Sukhasana forward fold, this seated forward fold. Now, if you feel that the blanket wedge is really restrictive, a second option is to move the blanket wedge and instead just allow your bolster to come in a little bit closer to your lap. And you would have to move your blocks closer as well, but you could just kind of bring that whole thing in and try it this way. You might prefer it, but you choose. Another adjustment you might want to make if you're like, this isn't feeling totally right, is if you feel that your bolster is too high up, you could take your highest level block and place it at the middle level. So you choose. And when we come into these supported shapes, of course, you're not going to feel the same intensity in your muscles as you would if the props were not here. So the goal is not necessarily to try to replicate that intensity with the props. The whole point of the props being here is to support our body so that we can come into a more restorative version of this pose and this shape. And that might mean that you feel less stretching sensation. And so can we shift our focus from being goal-oriented to being more present? Can you just be here with your body? Can you be here giving yourself permission to let go? Giving yourself permission to be held. And we'll be here in this shape for the next 18 rounds of breath. You might even notice your breath as you breathe in, how your stomach might press into the wedge or the bolster, feeling the feedback of the support beneath you, telling your body, I'm here to hold you up. And we'll begin to find completion on this side. And so if you'd like to use your hands to press into the floor and slowly ease up. Taking a moment at the top. You don't have to rush away. You don't have to rush to the next pose. We can just be here and feel. And then when you're ready, just switch sides. You could cross or change the cross of your legs, but first notice which leg is in front and which leg is in back. And then if you feel like you want to stretch your legs out for a moment, get some circulation, that's okay too. And then crossing your legs in the opposite direction. So whichever leg was in front could now be in back. Adjusting your propping. And then taking a breath in. Then exhaling to sink. Noticing that how you feel on one side could be totally different than how you feel on the other side. And that doesn't mean that one side is bad and the other side is better. It just means that your body is different from one side to the next, which is completely normal and common, because in order for our left and right side of our bodies to be exactly the same, like twins, would mean that we would have to use the two sides of our bodies exactly the same at all times, which is not realistic. So, the two sides of your body are more like siblings rather than twins. And we'll be here for another 16 to 18 rounds of breath. I give myself permission to let go and be held. Another 5 or so rounds of breath here. Last breath in and out. Take all of the time that you need to slowly press yourself up. There is no rush. And once you get to the top, you might take a moment we have a couple options as we move into our Shavasana, our final time of rest. One option is to do whatever you want. Any rest pose that feels welcome, that you're like, I want that, you can go ahead and move there. No permission needed. Second option is to take your blocks and have one at the highest level and one at the medium level. And then allow your bolster to rest. Actually, one at the highest level and then the one closest to you at the lowest level. Now that I'm looking at it. Yeah, that's better. Okay. And then I'm going to take my blankets. I'm going to adjust my bottom blanket because I want my spine and my neck, I want everything to be one level. So if you have a blanket beneath you, you might simply allow it to be a little bit longer so that your whole spine can be one level. And having some other blankets close by. If you want, you could send your legs up the bolster. And it might take some finagling. It might take a moment to find what feels right. You might even need to adjust your tailbone and your lower back. And so you might even press your feet on the bolster and just lift your tailbone, lift your whole lower back, maybe shift from side to side, and then extend the legs back up if that feels like something you want to do. And then taking a blanket. Now you could completely unfold it, but I like the weight of a folded blanket. You could even take 2 blankets if you want and drape it across your torso. So you could drape this across your, I'm going to open it a little bit actually so it's long enough. Drape it across your chest, your hips, and then if it's not heavy enough, you could take that second blanket and drape that as well. And what this does is you're basically creating like a weighted blanket, and it tells your nervous system that, hey, things are a little bit cozier, a little bit more grounded, and you can let go. You don't have to hold on so much because you're being held. And so whatever shape you're in, you can apply this weighted blanket technique. It's especially soothing to the nervous system when you apply it over your sensitive organs, your internal organs. So your torso area, where your intestines and your heart and your spleen and your diaphragm, all of those areas that we are so protective over and literally have to be because we need those to live. But having this gentle weight here, this supportive, soothing weight, can help allow the body ease into a little bit more rest. And so we'll be here for the next 5 minutes, but 4.5, 5 minutes. And I'll keep track of the time so that you can just let go as much as you want to. And the last invitation I'll give you is to return back to the awareness of the gravitational pull of the earth, just grounding down. You don't have to do anything to grow heavy. Your body is naturally grounding as you rest here, as you lay here. Shavasana, time of rest. You can stay here as long as you want. There is nothing saying that you have to leave this time of rest if you are not ready to. And when and if you decide you are ready to make your way out, that is your choice. And thank you for joining me in this class today. My hope for you is that you feel safe, connected, and at home in your body. Thank you.